Welcome to the Grace City Eugene podcast. We exist to help every person in our sphere of influence to encounter Christ, experience biblical community, and extend God's kingdom. You can learn more about us at gracecityeugene.com. Here's the podcast.
All right, how's it going, family? Pastor Chris here with this month's edition of Got Kids. And boy, do we have a special surprise for y'all this week. We have Greg and Debbie Mitchell from Vancouver, Canada, our Every Nation church up there. And they are well known in the Grace City family. They've been pouring into our church and our region and really our broader Every Nation family for decades. And I'm excited to get to have a conversation with them today about parenting. So Greg and Debbie, thank you so much for being with us. It's great to have you guys with us today.
Pastor Chris, it's just so great to be able to spend some time with you and everyone who's listening.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So if you guys haven't tuned in before, what this is about is helping to establish and equip folks that are following Jesus, and primarily in our church, but anyone who would listen to this, in how to engage stewarding God's kids that he's given to us, our children, towards him at home, out in the world, whatever that looks like. And I have known nobody in my life any more than Greg and Debbie that just have amazing advice and the heart of God and how they parent and help others to engage this world of parenting. So we're excited for that today. I would love it if you guys would just kick us off explaining kind of your family and your family dynamic. It is a unique one, and that can kind of be the lens that we get to view all of this amazing wisdom through. So I'll let you guys take it away.
I think Debbie's going to do a better job explaining that than I am. So you have a go.
Yeah, so we all together have 13 children. And the way that came about is our oldest is 33 and then our youngest is 14. And it's about 13 years ago, I was serving in our children's school, and I got to know a family there. The two of the children were in the same class in grade 1 with our daughter. And anyways, I did a lot of outreach there, began to reach out to these children. The long and short of it, we discovered that the mother was a severe alcoholic. I was part of having her report herself, walk through that with her. But long story short, after 2 years, about 5 months later, the children were removed from her. And then the extended family asked if we would take care of the sibling group of 5 while the mom got help. After 2 years, a permanent removal happened, and the children were going to go into foster care. And at that point, we spoke with our biological children, and we all agreed that we were going to together keep the children in our home and transition to being a foster home. It was the only way they could stay with us. And we've been doing that now and been a very large family. We've been parenting for 33 years since our oldest is 33. Our youngest is 14. We still have a 14-year-old, a 17-year-old here in our home, but all the others come around all the time as well. So we're very much still parenting.
Yes.
And old.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. The main thing I want to just talk about today, and I don't know exactly where it'll go and where we'll dig deeper, but this idea of parenting our kids in a secular education system. And we were talking before we came on, but a lot of families had all been at home for the last year and a half. And this fall, kids are all going back to school and everything. And it can be a shock to the system, like whatever curriculum stuff is covered, whatever, teachers are teaching in their curriculum, and it may be different than the beliefs at home or, what the Bible says about certain things. And I know that as I talk to parents, there can be a lot of anxiety and a lot of confusion about how to engage that appropriately and how to, honor just those that are teaching and, still also honor Jesus in our family's ideologies and beliefs. And so just curious, like what you would have to say about that from your experience or just walking with other people through that.
That's really good. It really is a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
That, the things often that are being taught in the school system don't align well with what the Bible teaches, and which in our understanding don't align well with love and what love really looks like. And so we've had to struggle with this personally and with others in our church and in wider community. So it really is an important topic to discuss. There seems to be two things, at least, that we are responsible for in this regard as parents. The first thing is that we're described as being gatekeepers. And so we don't let just everything go into young minds. We have a responsibility to make sure that the things that our children are being exposed to are healthy and good for their hearts. And so that's one side. And then the other side is what we want to be able to do is in considerate and thoughtful ways, let them experience the world while they're still under our care.
Mm.
And so what we sometimes find is that if parents swing the pendulum too hard over to being a gatekeeper, then their kids become sheltered. And so when they graduate, they really have no experience in how to process the different things that they're being exposed to in the secular world. And so they're kind of left on their own. But if we can help them, expose them again in ways that are thoughtful, but nevertheless, kind of pushing things a little bit, that if we can expose them to things while they're still in our care, then we're able to process those things with them. So by the time they graduate from high school, they've had many experiences of learning things that don't line up with the Bible and learning how to deal with that in a healthy way that's still respectful, but also they don't have to agree with everything that they're being taught.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
Can
really
I make
good.
a comment on that?
Yeah, please.
When I think about this, when I'm parenting and engaging with my children, there's always like two pendulums. There's religion and rebellion. And if I feel as though my children are kind of pushing against me, I ask myself the question, am I being too religious? And the answer to that is relationship. So I'm always trying to figure out how to foster a deeper relationship. And our goal is always to keep our children talking. If they start withdrawing, sneaky things like this, it's probably an indicator that either one of us or both of us aren't spending enough time with them, either as a family or even individually. So that for us is often a barometer that we'll talk about if one of them is, it's I just don't want to blame them because they're struggling for a reason. And I'm not there to try to fix the problem. I'm there to develop a deeper relationship with them and therefore hopefully be able to have the ability to talk about the moral reasons why. So that's a big thing. Like if you're correcting a behavior, you're religious if you're just saying don't, but you have relationship with them if you can explain the reason why I'm thinking about this, because in the big picture, this is where this will take you, and giving them a moral reason to curb their behavior. So for us, it's a lot about staying in relationship versus creating them pushing away from us because we're being too religious.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
How do you encourage that kind of mindset to be one that your kids then take that into the schools? Because if relationship is the focus of how you gatekeep and protect and contextualize, everything that's going on, I think just from hearing you guys having taught this stuff before, you also pass that relational focus on to your kids. And so they have people that are differing in opinions. They have teachers that are an authority figure, how have you found it helpful to manage those relationships at a young age where they maybe haven't experienced somebody telling them what they really feel about their ideas and all of these things, right? In that context where even, I don't know about for you guys, but parents can't even volunteer in the schools, or we can't even go in the front doors in schools because of COVID protocol. So there used to be a day where like, hey, I'll go volunteer a day a week and at least be around the environment and know kind of what my kids are experiencing. But we don't even have that opportunity, at least here. And so helping our kids to take a relational approach in the midst of those tensions and things. What would you say about that?
Yeah. Really
Let's tell you a funny story. When Jonathan was young, I got a phone call from the school once and they said, you need to stop. You need to help your child not tell other children because we're a very multicultural community here. So a little boy had a gundi on his head. They come from the Punjabi nation, and that they have the little kerchief on their head. And Jonathan told him he was going to go to hell. So we had to curb that a little. And but anyway, that's just a funny story. But you are trying to figure out how to get them to be loving and relational without being, again, religious and appearing to be judgmental. So
one of the things that I think is a helpful way to think is in terms of our own fear. So if we're afraid that our children are going to become indoctrinated, they're going to believe more in what the school is teaching than what they learn at home, if we come in fear, they pick up that fear. And that what ends up happening is the fear that we would want to somehow control them and make sure everything kind of lines up perfectly with what we believe. When that fear gets translated into them, then they behave in similar ways toward their friends. Really and good. So as we deal with our anxiety and go, wow, that's a really interesting thought. What do you think? And have a conversation about it, that decreases their anxiety so that when they engage in discussion at school, they won't be controlling either. And so really it begins with us managing our own fear. And as we do that, we help them be able to manage their fear and be able to approach these things in a much more relational way.
Oh, that's really good. It's really good. Yeah, because especially these kids are coming out of not being around each other for a year and a half. I mean, we didn't even have sports here. And so it seemed like this first couple months, they're just trying to learn how to like love each other and care about each other and care about each other's opinions again. And then you add the layers of all the different family dynamics and hardships that have happened through these last couple of years, and you dump them on these poor teachers' laps, right? Like with little less help than they're used to having. And we found that at least for our 7th grade daughter, she's our oldest, it's a challenging kind of dynamic, especially those first 2 months were, because relationships were just so foreign to these kids. And it was a really hard thing to manage, but that's good about, are they taking the fear that is in the home with them and then, kind of imposing that on their relationships there. I really like that perspective. So thank you for that.
I think the important thing in parenting, especially about this, is, I mean, many of you sat under Greg's teaching, but Greg will often talk about taking our pulse as parents and saying, is this an anxious moment? And I think that's what you're trying to say. But I think we can only ever really look at our own hearts, even as a parent, because if we're reactionary, we're going to create reactionary children. And so for me, a lot of times having this many children, I really have had to learn how to, just breathe and take my pulse and not react. And that's, we all do it. I mean, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but over these years and parenting so many different variables within our home, it's really had to hone that skill. And so I think I would really encourage you as parents to really ask yourself, what are you reacting out of? And I mean, you use the word fear, or we use the word anxiety, but I think that's a really important thing. We can only begin with us and be humble and admit our own flaws, or we translate our own flaws into our children. So I think self-reflection on how what these situations at school are causing, the same-sex topic will come up, and what comes up inside of us, and really, really being able to work that through so that we can come with a non-anxious approach to our children. I think will really help a lot.
Oh, that's really good. I have found that one of the best ways of checking my pulse on my parenting and my reactivity is the comments my kids make about certain topics, because they come from me probably, or, Bree's a perfect parent, I'm not. And so those all come from me when I'm hearing those things. But, she goes back to school and there's a lot of, like you mentioned, just a lot of the same sex gender talk that's happening. And maybe a flippant comment comes out because she knows this is what we teach about the Bible or whatever else. And I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? I'm like, oh, that's my fault, And so really being attentive to that, those comments aren't just your kid's brokenness, but likely your lazy parenting in just saying something, an anecdotal statement, instead of actually sharing the heart about something. And I found once I will pay attention to that and share the heart, that equips my kids so much more for that environment when they know the heart of these things, rather than just the rule of these things, which I think you mentioned as the pendulum, right? Are there any other kind of signs that you guys have seen over the years in a similar way that can help us address those things, or like dashboard lights going off when maybe there's some things we need to address in our own parenting that are yielding unhealthy, things at school, those things?
I think that Debbie really said it well, that a huge warning light for us is when our kids aren't talking to us, that something kind of has broken down there. And this has lots of ramifications, because if they aren't talking to us, then that means we aren't able to process things. But what it also probably is a sign of is that if they aren't able to bond and connect with us, then they're going to bond and connect with their peer group. And their peer group, in a sense, is going to become their parents, as it were, be the primary influence in their lives. So not only do we want to be able to be close to our kids and invest in them and have a healthy relationship, we know that if they don't do that, then they're going to look elsewhere. And so it becomes doubly important that we keep those lines of communication open. We look a lot at their face and how they're doing, and whether they have a downcast face, and how to be able to kind of stir the ability for them to talk again. And as they do, they feel safer, they feel closer to us. And then when other voices do come into their lives, through their friends or teachers, they don't carry near the amount of weight because they've been so well connected to us.
That's really good. It's definitely not easy, and you definitely can't be lazy to do well in this topic, I've found. And the intentionality, right, is just, it's more important than ever. And the more kids you have, which I only have a fraction of what you guys have, but like it compounds, and you think you get one kid figured out, and then 2 weeks later they're different, and then the dynamics in the house change and all that too. And have you found this topic in like the school stuff, coming home and all that, how have you found that interacting within your home amongst your kids? Are you guys, do they usually bring you into it, or is there ever just kind of like kid talk and stuff happening around this kind of thing?
We have an interesting dynamic in that we have 3 biological children, and our second one after Jonathan was adopted. So we have adoption. And then of course we have these children that are not yet adopted. We call ourselves a forever family. So the non-biological children. It's very interesting because over the years, I mean, we thought the same techniques would work with the non-biological children, and they didn't. And we had to learn a lot about attachment theory, and because the kids had a lot of, they've been hurt and rejected and abandoned and all these kinds of feelings. And so it took a lot. I mean, Greg changed his whole parenting course after we started parenting these kids, because we had to learn a whole other, it's so different between. But that being said, I think what that helped me do is think about discipleship in general, because in a sense, the people we're reaching out to are our non-biological children. And so the skills that you're learning, reaching the world, or reaching people that come into your home, I think they're kind of like counting the cost. And, there's a cost to parenting. There's a cost to discipleship. And I think that it's a costly love, a selfless love. And as a parent, if we're not willing to sacrifice and hurt and bleed for our children, we will probably have children that will pull away from us. And so I think that we, over the years, we're very, what's the word, self-effacing to it. Like we don't come as the professional parents. We actually come feeling quite broken, Greg will often say, I'm not the best dad, I'm just your dad. That's a common thing. And they'll laugh. And you're good at that. I'm too intense. I'll be more on the religious side, and Greg can crack a joke. But then other times, I'm definitely the playful one, and then Greg's the anchor. So, but I guess what I'm saying is that as parents, we're called to the same cost as we are when we think in terms of reaching the lost.
Mm.
And that just I think it takes a personal heart of sacrifice and selflessness. And I think we learn to do that as we parent. We have to learn it, or we shut down, withdraw, and pull away. Then that will never bode well.
Right.
Yeah, I think
Is that helpful?
I think a helpful way to think of this is if we can think of there being a valley that our kids have to get through.
Mhm.
And it's a valley of, soul searching and having their own relationship with Jesus and know how to interact with the world in a healthy way. And so parenting is all about choosing where our position is.
Mhm.
And so if our position is on the other side of the valley, shouting directions over to them on where to take their step, that's going to be one form of parenting. And it's all about giving advice. It's all about being the professional, as Debbie was talking about, that we aren't. And so we can kind of have that posture where we have all the answers, or we have it all figured out, and we're on the other side of the valley shouting for them where to put their steps for how to walk forward. Or we can have a view where we're actually walking alongside them. And the goal stays the same, where we want to be more like Jesus and walk in his love and truth and authority. But now, instead of shouting directions and giving advice, we're now walking with them, exploring together where to take the next step.
Yeah.
And so this, to me, lifts lots of pressure off of parenting, where we don't have to have it all figured out. We just need to be close enough with our kids and
good.
work it through with our kids in a way that will help us figure out together what the next steps will be.
Yeah.
And I find this to be a much better position that we relate to our kids in, as opposed to being the professionals with all the advice.
Yeah.
That is so good. So, final question I have for you guys is more of just like, if there is anything else each of you would share this topic, or maybe just something else God's put on your heart, like to encourage that are parents or aspiring parents that are watching this, what would it be like if you could share, one final thing?
Yeah.
I think what always comes to my mind is having a big picture vision for my kids. So we'll often say in our marriage seminars or parenting seminars, like there's got to be a bigger reason. And so we think a lot about the legacy we want to leave. Like I care that my children will follow Christ. So I don't have the luxury. I tell myself this, and I mean, I've never done it, but the luxury of slamming the doors or yelling at Greg or fighting in front, because there's a bigger thing always going on that calls us as parents to godliness.
Mm.
And so I think about the legacy we want to leave, with the legacy we want our children to have. And so in the moments of strife and struggle and, the heartaches and whatever, what will get, I'll just speak personally, but what will get me through is the big picture. Because in the moment, I'm like, get me out of here, I'll run. And I've had those moments because there have been times where the things that we've had to handle have been beyond what I think we could have handled aside from the grace of God. But you stay and you pray. And if I was to show you my pillow, it's so stained. But those tears, I often think of those tears as held by God, and it's the anointing for the future. And I have to think like that. And it's what keeps me going, is the big picture. Because the momentary struggles sometimes just go, is this worth it? What have we done? And but overall, when I look back, I really believe that none of the 7 extra children, they're so far, none of them have been on welfare. They're going to school. They're doing okay. They're not without struggles. They have legitimate things that, we're dealing with ADD and fetal alcohol syndrome, and there's very real issues, but they're growing up in stability. And it's those moments where it's just been super hard that I keep the big picture, or we'll talk about the big picture. And that keeps me going, because I want to have grandchildren that follow God. So I don't have the luxury in a moment to just say, forget this, that's sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's really
It's
good.
really good.
If I could just add to that, I think Proverbs says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
That's good.
And I think that often in parenting, we think that our goal is to fix our kids. But when we know that all our kids are ever doing is reacting off of us,
Yeah.
then the best thing that we can do for our kids is to be a better person for them to react off of.
Oh.
And that's exactly what Debbie is talking about, that we're the kind of people who have a big vision, who care about them in the context of something much more profound. And so as we manage our own fears and anxiety, as we say no to sinfulness and yes to love and kindness, then what ends up happening is our kids will react off of that.
Mhm.
Instead of reacting off of our fear and control, they'll be then reacting off of our kindness and generosity and humility.
Mhm.
And so the best way to change our children is to approach them with a good heart.
Yeah.
And out of that good heart, it's surprising how, we don't have to be amazing people. We just have to be people whose heart wants Jesus and wants to be able to love others. And as we relate to our kids on that basis, it's amazing how easily they turn towards us and we're able to work through things together.
That's so good.
Can I make just
appreciate
one
you.
more comment?
Absolutely. Yes.
And this just came to my mind as Greg, like, if you're married, keep your marriage strong.
Yeah.
And your children will react off of your marriage. Sometimes our children are acting out because they'll feel tension that's going on in the home between the spouses.
Mhm.
So don't be afraid to ask for help if you're struggling in your marriage. If a child is, because there was times with one of our children, it caused a lot of tension in our marriage. Get help. Talk to your pastor. They're wonderful people. So don't be afraid to work on your marriage. And if you're a single parent, God bless you. And we know it's a really challenging thing to do. So if you're a single parent, seek out a married couple that you can find covering under. And as married couples, we should be looking out for the single parents in our communities. Because parenting is hard to do alone. And so, my heart just goes out because there's lots of single parents now. And we want to love you. And we want to know that you have a place to turn and that you don't have to do this alone. And so I just want to say that as part of a parenting seminar, that keep your marriage strong. And if you're not married, stay close to people who can mentor you and carry you, and people that can be with your children and be other influences.
That's really good.
That's really good. I appreciate that. You guys are amazing. Just as kind of a thought or endorsement I want to share with people. We were at a cluster, Greg, and you were there, and Jonathan was there, and you were sharing just some parenting stuff and some of these things that you teach about. And there were some pastors that hadn't sat under your teaching on this stuff before. And I got to witness this. They came up to Jonathan afterwards. They're like, okay, this is great. Like, your dad's teaching all this stuff, but like, is that really what it was like growing up in his home, looking for the inside scoop? And Jonathan was just like, ever since I can remember, that's all I've experienced is him and mom doing their best to be consistent in that with everything. And so I say that because if you're listening, this isn't just some book or theory. This is the life that these folks live, and their children testify to it. And so we thank you guys for being that example. You guys always encourage and motivate and inspire me to be a better dad and a better man. And I just thank you for pouring into our family.
It's a privilege.
Yeah, it really is a privilege. God bless you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you're tuning in, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next month with another episode of Got Kids. God bless and have a great week.